there, it's Heather here with Underwater Panther, and today I wanted to actually discuss what is the ego, or our sun sign. According to astrology, we go by the month and day we were born, and then the ego, psychologically, you can like take an MBTI test, or you can do what I do, is I pretty much go by astrology. It is actually very accurate unless somebody has their Mercury in a different placement, which I do. So I'm not a full-blown Pisces. I am a Pisces Aquarius slant. So there are many different subtypes of each archetype or personality type. It just depends. So I'm just going to do a little overview of what the ego is. The ego is our order and our autopilot function. When it is asleep, we are egotistical. When it is waking up, we become self-aware. And when we are awake within our ego or conscious, we are in goodwill. So the ego is our personality's boss. It is who we are becoming and how we act. It is our drive and character, and it is actually only about 10% of our conscious mind. So the sun sign guides your personality, characteristics, essential qualities, and actions in skill development, professional career, competition, all forms of social interactions, the ego, creativity, and logic. The ego, or sun sign, is the most conscious part of your personality, where your common sense and reasoning lives, and allows you to organize your thoughts and use them to make judgments on the external world. The ego, or sun sign, is our uniqueness and potential mastery. It is the strongest when healthy domain of our mind. It represents your approach and overall nature in this life. We identify with it strongly and have the potential to live consciously through it by personal and spiritual growth and development, fine-tuning, and integration. So the ego doesn't develop until the child realizes he or she is more than their mother, father, or guardian, which is certainly after infancy, which is around 1 year old. Prior to that, they are functioning in their id, or animal nature. And I will kind of argue that our id, superego, or our rising sign astrologically, it gives a whole heck of a lot of information on how we were raised. So our ego develops after the id in infancy. Beta waves understands others have needs and desires too. So your id and superego battle to influence your decisions, while the ego is objectively looking at the situation. Our ego is here to protect us. It is our flow state. Consciousness itself is order. Excuse me. And we are conscious because of the ego. So the ego creates order. Consciousness, or the ego, or our sun sign astrologically, is always challenging the chaos. So our ego's main priorities: number 1, control. The ego has the job of controlling and regulating instinctive impulses. Number 2, adaptation. The ego relates to the external and internal realities and tries to adapt to them. And number 3, integration. This refers to the ability of the ego to integrate the different aspects of ourselves and our life. The ego really has been demonized by Western society, but I strongly encourage you to embrace who you are fully and be happy you were given your ego in order to be a unique individual. We actually work well with our egos. So why isn't our ego the enemy? The hero, parent, and child cognitive functions within the ego are actually pretty positive and consciously ran. Not only are they more conscious than not, but they do allow us to protect our well-being and allows us to create healthy boundaries. So it starts getting more difficult to navigate consciously when we reach the inferior function, and I do break these down in this series. So the inferior function is the gateway to the subconscious mind. Because it is a gateway, I would not pin the ego as our enemy. Our ego is our powerhouse, our courage, and has our greatest strengths. Consciously, do keep that in mind. So ego key points. We have it's the easiest, most accessible part of our mind because it costs the least amount of energy to use. It operates mainly in conscious and pre-conscious levels, but also has elements of unconscious because the ego evolved from the id. So our main goal is to become who we truly are through individuation. Personality formation comes through struggle, suffering, and sacrifice through courage. So, integrating the ego personality. The ego is commonly misidentified with the concept of egocentrism. The selfish trait is actually of a person with a weak and undeveloped ego. To transcend the ego does not mean to erase the ego. As said in Eastern and New Age philosophies, it means to be no longer limited by or to grow beyond in an integrated way. Okay, so I have a little side tangent because I mentioned New Age, which back in 2012, I had actually, I was watching Elliot Hulse on YouTube, and I came across Paul Chek because of Elliot Hulse, and that is what really started my own more conscious awakening and my absolute feverish research into all things nutrition, fitness, politics, society in general, Eastern and Western philosophies. It goes on and on. So the New Age movement, they are people, let's see, I kind of wrote notes down here. The New Age movement people are considered radical. So, you know, when you get into spirituality, you know, it's like even in politics and religion, anything can become radical. So, we need to rein each other in and try to be as middle grounded as possible. The New Age, like, they're really radical because, like, their brains have absolutely fallen out. They have nothing to hold on to or reach for. We do not need to tear down systems completely. It's okay to be mad at those systems, but really we need to organize and remove the bad people within those systems. So with like genetically modified organisms and AI, I realize we are closer to the point of no return. We won't be there until we are all becoming too radical or we flip over and just give up. So just keep in mind that this New Age movement, there's a lot of people that are coming back to religion. I was raised religious. I was raised Catholic. I've been baptized. I went through communion. I went to a private Catholic school until I was in 4th grade. So those are my foundations, and that is how my family themselves were raised. So I do agree that they are really good. They're really good principles and foundations. They really make you, you know, the religion in general makes you focus on morals and doing the right thing. I think that is very important. But like all these extremists, the activism and the New Age with religion, they are far too radical because they are wanting to completely burn down all the systems. And that's not a good idea. I am traditional, and being traditional, I am slow to move. I do not like change, and I realize, but I'm also very open-minded, meaning like I want to understand different people's motives, perspectives, why do they think why they do. But just please realize that if you tear down all these systems, you're going to be lost in a desert of nothingness, and there will be absolutely more chaos than there ever was. So just keep that in mind. That I understand that you're mad about what's going on in this world, economically, politically, and so on and so forth. But we need to keep systems in place. We just need to identify those radicalists and get them out of power. Educate yourselves in all realms and understand, distinctions between opposites. Focus on what you believe in. And that is my little rant on the New Age and radical, either politically or religiously. So back to the ego. The conscious ego is synonymous with the conscious mind. The ego is not bad, but necessary for a healthy existence. The ego represents what seems subjectively to be reason and common sense, and is what we recognize as being I. One of the fundamental functions is the testing of reality, but this does not bear full fruit until we are set free from inner conflicts between the id and superego. We are born without an ego because we cannot differentiate between ourselves and our caregivers. We develop more of a sense of self as we face reality and interact with the world. We want to become autonomous, inner-directed human beings through the process of individuation with an independent mind. So the superego, or a rising sign, differs from the conscious in that its frame of reference is morality, not ethics, what one should do rather than whether it is right or wrong. It includes unconscious elements and is inhibited by our past and may be in conflict with current ethical values. During the pre-logical stage of ego development, the superego acts as a very restrictive parent. However, as successive stages of cognitive maturity are attained, control passes from the superego to the ego, unless not normally developed. With greater freedom from our superego constraints and greater self-awareness, cognitive processes play an expanding part in the developing sense of morality, and this is culminated by an active searching towards a universal ethical system. So, introjection happens when the functions of an external person or parent are taken over by its mental representation of self. Parental figures act as guardians of a child until one can understand what to do in the absence of such guidance. In a mature mind, such introjects are inspected and provide guidelines, but an immature mind operates subconsciously as inhibiting restrictions and enforcing controls in perceptions, attitudes, goals, and behavior. So both ego strength and independence from the superego are essential for an individual to be truly creative and outside of the box of his upbringing and parental and peer standards. Intelligence, which is essentially the ability to quickly establish new and multiple linkages between thoughts, ideas, and feelings, is a necessary requisite of the creative synthesis. True creativity does not stem from the id. It is the result of a synthesis occurring in the unconscious ego with conscious ego direction. Its emergence into consciousness is prompted by relative freedom from repression and the dictates of the superego. Creativity reduces instinctual tension. It fuses pleasure with reality and satisfies the libido. Our goals with our ego is to return to our true self, regardless of upbringing, and use it in a creative way to ultimately create the reality that we envision. So that's my little spiel on the ego today.